I cannot sleep at night. I don't sleep at night. I just keep thinking of the 33 years that he spent in jail, and he did not do anything.
In July of 1988, 5-year-old Marcus Yates was shot in the head in a Southwest Philly candy store. His death rocked the city, but it would be decades before the Yates family discovered the police story about that summer was built on lies.
My mother came, she was having a sleepover for all the kids. And Marcus was the kind of little boy that did not want to leave my side. He was kind of like attached to me at the hip. And so before he left, he said, "Mom, you okay?" I said, "I'm okay, go ahead and have some fun." He said, "Okay, I'm gonna go, but let me get my hug and a kiss." I said, "Okay," and so he gave me my big hug and a kiss. And he went out the door with his grandmother and the rest of the kids.
We would go to that candy store almost every time we went over. It had all the penny candy, it had all the games, you know what I mean? So that was the corner store.
The Yates brothers were there on a Monday afternoon when two men argued, starting on the street and then escalating later inside the store. One man smacked a soda from the other's hands. He pulled a gun and started shooting. The other man quickly returned fire. 11 kids were inside the store, including brothers Tony, Malcolm, and Marcus Yates.
That's all I heard was just blah, 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 smack, psh, and then pop, 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 pop.
All I can remember was just I had this excruciating burning sensation in my foot, and I fell. And as I fell, I was looking at Marcus, and he fell.
My husband and I, we both worked at the Naval Shipyard. And so we said, okay, it's Monday, let's go pick up the kids. It's time for us to take them home. And then we got there, and all we seen was a river of police cars. Tony ran up to me, and he said, Mom, Marcus and Malcolm got shot. And I couldn't believe it, because I'm looking at this little boy, this little 11-year-old boy full of blood all over his clothes. And I just feel like I thought it was in a dream, it was a nightmare, you know?
Malcolm Yates was shot twice in the hip and foot. He survived, but Marcus died in the hospital that night.
See, I'm a mother. And not to be a mother to all my kids, it's very painful.
Detectives said they found the two men responsible for the shooting, Ike Johnson and Michael Gaynor. Both were sentenced to life in prison.
I was so happy that they found them and they was sentenced to life in prison, because I said, I'm doing life. I don't see my son anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, thank God you're in prison and that's where you need to stay.
Decades passed. Rochelle Yates Whittington became an activist against gun violence. Malcolm and Tony Yates grew up and started their own families. But Rochelle still didn't feel a sense of closure.
I was holding on a lot of resentment, holding a lot of anger. One night I was, in a dream, I just said, Lord said, you need to forgive them. You need to forgive them. And I was like, I don't want to do that, like saying to myself, I don't want to do that. They took my baby, tore my life up. And I just kept having dream after dream after dream.
Sometimes we have to just step back. Lord, what is it you're trying to tell me?
Rochelle decided to meet with the two men convicted of killing her son. Victim Services helped set up contact.
I was still nervous because I didn't know how they was going to respond to me. I didn't know if they was going to be even, mean or being vindictive or saying something like, I killed your son, so what, I talked to Ike Johnson first, and I talked to him for 3 hours. And he apologized to me for everything. He was sorry for everything he had done. And he admitted to me that I was the shooter. But he said, Michael Gaynor was not the shooter. And I said, what? He said, Michael Gaynor wasn't even there. And I said, so you mean to tell me Michael been in prison for 36 years for a crime he never committed? And he said, yes. Ike's story matched up, and then when Michael started to speak, I believe, no doubt in my mind, that he was not there.
Marcus Yates' killing had outraged Philadelphia politicians and residents. They put pressure on police to quickly solve the case and lock up the men responsible. But an Inquirer investigation uncovered that police allegedly used fabricated statements, physical violence, false imprisonments, and threats to secure their case against Michael Gaynor. This is his story, another person, another family, whose future was hollowed out by the events of July 1988.
Michael born in my home, in my house in Jamaica. He was a cute little boy. That's all I can say. He was a cute little boy. That's Mikey.
I'm living in New York from 1980. Michael was a good boy. He was very good.
Whole family.
You know, he was here with us, and then he went to Pennsylvania with his friends. And sometimes I said, Michael, come home, but he stays there.
After moving to Philly, Gaynor started to sell drugs, but he was a low-level dealer. He wasn't known to carry a gun or use drugs himself. He was living near Kingsessing, a working-class neighborhood with a tight-knit Jamaican community that was thrust into the spotlight after the candy store shooting.
The focus was on this case. Wherever I go, I see a news camera there. Detective Paul Worrell, he came and he said, Mrs. Yates, we're going to find these two. If it's the last thing we're going to do, we're going to find these two.
I don't quite remember, but I remember some friend called and say, Michael is arrested for murder. I saying I don't think so. Michael is not a person like that. Michael, no, he wouldn't just go into a place and just start shooting because he loves children.
The lead investigator on the case was Paul Worrell, who's now linked to several high-profile cases of alleged police misconduct. The police took Gaynor to the roundhouse, where Gaynor said Worrell held a plastic bag over his head while screaming at him to admit to the crime. He refused, but police were already working on a case against him, which key witnesses allege was built on coercion and lies. First was Christopher Duncan, whose parents owned the candy store. He was inside on the day of the shooting. Duncan was killed in an unrelated shooting a decade later, but his sister remembers what happened to him that summer.
They took my brother in because I guess he had a bench warrant. He said he was beaten. His face was swollen. He said they beat him up real bad and said, that's Michael. You gotta say that's him.
Police held Duncan at the roundhouse for 5 days. At first, he said he recognized Ike Johnson, who also went by the name Donovan Baby Don Grant, but didn't know the other man involved in the shooting. Yet after a few days, he signed a statement identifying that man as Michael Gaynor.
The whole family was very upset at him and asked Chris, why would you do that? And Michael wasn't there. He was like, sis, I was scared. I was scared for my life. They was beating me up. They said they was gonna pin it on me. And I just was scared. Most of all, it really affected my mom. My mom was so sad about it. Because my parents was there. And they know Michael. And knew that wasn't Michael there. So we all knew. I wasn't there, but I'm just saying my mom and my dad was there, and she said Michael wasn't there.
After the preliminary hearing, Duncan came forward to change his story. He testified that he'd lied because he was intimidated by the police. His mother, Ruby Duncan, who owned the store, called the police to insist Gaynor wasn't there that day. Still, a year and a half after the crime, Michael Gaynor and Ike Johnson were tried together for Marcus Yates' murder. Johnson admitted to the shooting, but the case against Gaynor was thin. There was no physical evidence, and several witnesses testified that he wasn't in the store, including his co-defendant Ike Johnson. The prosecutor's case rested on 5 children who identified Gaynor during the trial, including Malcolm and Tony Yates.
I was under the understanding that this was who it was, they did it, we need to lock them up.
Do you think you could have positively identified the 2 men who did this?
No, not a chance. I wouldn't know those 2 gentlemen before this if they walked by me today, right?
All I know is there was a dark skin with scruffy beard.
And that's every black man in Southwest Philly.
Prosecutors urged the jury to give extra weight to the kids' and detectives' testimony. It worked. Gaynor was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. When reached by a reporter for comment on the case last month, lead investigator Paul Worrell said, "I hope Michael Gaynor rots in jail."
They told the kids to tell lies on my brother. And to me, I think those kids' testimony, that's what got my brother convicted for murder that he didn't do. If a kid's understand, testifying, saying that this is the man they saw did the shooting, that's it. Who they gonna believe?
We were at the case that day when they say he was guilty, but we couldn't get to talk to him there. Days after the trial, he called crying and said, "Mom, they said I'm guilty and I wasn't even there." He's not a guy that get angry. He was sad. He was very sad.
Since the trial, witnesses have alleged gross police misconduct. Interviews and initial witness statements show that the police department also failed to pursue evidence pointing to a different suspect in the shooting. Michael Gaynor was 21 when he last saw freedom. Now he's 57.
He want to go back to school. I think he said he want to be a plumber. But right now he's in jail doing painting because he said, "Mom, I paint every day." He said, "When I come out, I'm going to paint your whole house because I'm a painter." We talk a lot. We used to talk a lot. He was a very justified child. And his family, all his family love him. Every one of them love him.
Rochelle and her family traveled to the Bronx in July to meet Gaynor's mother. She wants to help get him released from prison.
Oh my goodness. Whew, a lot of emotions. A lot of emotions before we went to the Bronx. I've never been to the Bronx before. We prayed together and hugged each other, and it was beautiful. I know my son is gone, but what if this was my other son? And I know for a fact that he didn't do it. I believe Michael Gaynor is innocent. And I will stand in front of the world to tell them that this man should be released.
He always have a hope. He always have a hope. And that hope, you know, he have it in mind that he's going to be out one day. He keep on saying, "Mom, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. I'm going to be out." I'm just longing for the day. Maybe I want him to be out before I die because I'm 87 years old and tomorrow is not promised to me, you know? So I would like to really see Mike before I passed away.
I miss my brother. It's been too long. Way overdue. My brother couldn't hurt a fly. He's a good, decent guy. I'm sorry for her loss. She lost her son. I'm sorry for that. But my brother didn't do it. He's innocent. I just want him home. I just want to hug my brother. I just want him home.